In 2019, I was an 11-year-old kid playing Roblox on my parents' computer. The computer was so bad that even some of the simplest games struggled to run. I didn't know what Roblox Studio was, I didn't know what scripting was. I didn't even really think about the fact that every game on Roblox I played had been created by actual players. To me, Roblox games just existed. 6 years later, I helped release a superhero game that reached more than 1,000 concurrent players. I built an enormous world containing multiple cities. I earned my first real income from development. Then, the entire game suddenly disappeared because of Roblox moderation. I left the development team, committed myself completely to my own RPG, and then Roblox restored the game about 2 days later. Yeah, that actually happened. This is the story of how I went from being a random kid playing Roblox to preparing to release my own game. My Roblox development journey. I first joined Roblox in January 2019. At that point, I didn't have any ambition to become a developer. I was just playing whatever looked fun with my friends. My parents' computer could barely handle Roblox, but I still loved it. I would join games, lag around, and somehow continue playing anyway. That was enough for me. After a while, though, I started drifting away from Roblox. I spent more time playing Minecraft and other games, and during COVID, I briefly came back to play Mad City with my friends. For a while, that was basically all Roblox meant to me. Mad City, driving around, some simulators, tycoons. Getting arrested in Mad City was always fun. Probably getting mad at my friends as well. Then that phase ended too. By the time I was 13 or 14, Roblox had started feeling like a game I was growing out of. At least that's what I thought. I barely used the platform and I had absolutely no reason to believe that it would eventually become one of my biggest parts of my life. But in 2024, something brought me back. Superheroes. I had become a massive superhero fan. I watched Marvel, DC, Invincible, all those great things. And eventually I started wondering, where are all the good multiplayer superhero games? There were some regular superhero games, but very few gave me that feeling of actually existing inside a superhero world with other players. The main place where I could find experiences like this that had the multiplayer aspect as well was Roblox. That was when I discovered a game called Age of Heroes. The game was already somewhat old and wasn't receiving updates anymore, but I loved it. It had powers, progression, it had factions. It also had an unbelievable number of exploiters. Seriously, I think half the player base could teleport. Because the game was no longer being updated, I made the decision that every completely inexperienced developer makes. I promised that I would create something newer and better. I had never properly used Roblox Studio in my life before. I barely understood scripting. I had never created a real interface, but apparently none of that mattered to 16-year-old me. At the end of 2024, I opened Roblox Studio properly for the first time, and honestly, it was kind of stupid. I didn't know how to create UI, so I used the most advanced development method available to me. I placed random toolbox interfaces everywhere. Menus didn't match, buttons were probably stolen from 6 different games, scripts barely worked. The map was decent for a beginner though, but there wasn't much actual gameplay. The one system I was genuinely proud of was a mediocre flight system. It really wasn't that great, but it moved me through the air, and at the time that was basically magic. AI coding tools weren't nearly as useful to me back then, so I was trying to learn everything through tutorials, random scripts, and pure confusion. After around 2 months, I gave up though because I just couldn't really make something that well. I had promised to make the next great superhero game and produce the flying character surrounded by Toolbox UI, so I returned to playing games instead of developing. I thought that was the end of my development career. It wasn't. Around January or February of 2025, during the release period of Invincible Season 3, I met a group of people in Age of Heroes who were also massive fans of the show. We decided to create a faction called the Coalition of Planets. Our official mission was to defeat the Viltrumites and become the most powerful Invincible faction. Our actual motivation, though, was that the leader of the Viltrumite group was just annoying to us. He acted like he was unbeatable, bullied some of my newer friends, and generally took the whole thing far too seriously. Fortunately, I was already around level 10,000, so he couldn't really touch me. My friend Noah was also around that level, but most of our new recruits had no levels and no idea how to fight, so we trained them. We helped them level up, we taught them combat, and after beating the Viltrumites enough time that they became very emotional about it and left, we decided our faction needed something more official. We needed a headquarters. The Viltrumites already had their own game with a council room, chairs, a throne, and places where they could hold meetings. Naturally, I wanted ours to be better. So I returned to Studio once again and built an interior for the coalition of planets. It was the first time I had ever managed a real group, and building a place specifically for that group felt different to me. People were actually using something that I made, they were playing it in a way. They could hold meetings, roleplay, have a faction identity, and I had fun building. After completing the interior, I wanted to expand it. Instead of having the headquarters surrounded by nothing, I began building the city of Telescria, which was invincible, the city that surrounded the coalition headquarters. At some point, we heard that the Viltrumite faction might be shutting down. Apparently, losing repeatedly was not good for their morale, and many people actually left. One of their members told us that he had been working on a full Viltrum planet for their group. It turned out that both factions had independently started building their own planets. He eventually left them and joined us because he disliked their leader as well, so now our project had Telescria and Viltrum. I didn't really like the existing Viltrum map though, so we rebuilt the whole thing from scratch. At the time, that just seems like another fun project. I had no idea that rebuilding Viltrum would become one of the most important decisions of my development career, and even after the coalition became less active, I continued working on that exact game. Age of Heroes was becoming boring to many of us, and I wasn't specifically interested in leading the faction anymore, but I was interested in building. We created more locations, polished Viltrum, and even made a space-themed main menu where players could choose between planets and teleport to them. I was incredibly proud of it. In around May 2025, I uploaded one of my first proper development showcases. It showed the Viltrum map and my flight system. I posted it inside the Discord server of a Superman game, which I didn't really know much about at the time. The server belonged to a development group called Soup Studios. That decision would matter later. But before that happened, I made a classic beginner mistake. I met someone who wanted to create the ultimate Invincible game. He already had a development team of around 8 people. That probably should have been a warning sign, to be honest. Small creators cannot usually afford 8 developers, but I was new, excited, and desperate to work on a real project finally. So I joined, and to the surprise of absolutely nobody, it failed. The project had too many people, no reliable budget, and not enough organization. By June, I had lost most of my motivation again, so once more I returned to simply playing games. That was when a completely random boss fight changed my life. I was playing a fantasy RPG on Roblox called Blue Heater 2. I loved the atmosphere, the progression, and the feeling of exploring an MMO-style world. During a boss fight, I met someone who seemed pretty cool. He gave me some cosmetic items that were worth Robux, so naturally, I asked him how he could afford to give those away to me. He told me he was a developer who occasionally worked on games. We moved to Discord to talk for a while, and I showed him some of my builds. To my surprise, he offered me work, not on a superhero map, not in a huge city, as an RB maker. Yeah, I didn't really like it too much, but the commission paid around 7,000 Robux. That might not sound like life-changing money now, but to me, it absolutely was. This was the first time anyone had offered to pay me for something I created. I got to work and tried my hardest to make it good, and when I finished it, he actually paid me. He wasn't a scammer. Someone had looked at my work and decided that it had a real value. Sadly, I was never able to contact him again afterwards. Hello? Dang. But the commission changed how I viewed development. Before that, studio had never been a hobby. and a collection of unfinished ideas. Now I knew I could potentially turn it into something more, so I decided to try again. I returned to the owner of the Superman server, where I had posted my Vultrum showcase. His name was Strongman. Odd name, I know. I had already been testing some of his games, so I asked whether I could help build the map for his Superman project. He agreed. I worked on locations including the Fortress of Solitude, Kent Farm, a military camp, and a new spawn area with a park and statue of Superman. For that work, I earned a decent amount of Robux. It wasn't a massive amount, but it felt honest. I built something, he used it, and I got paid. And we continued working together. Then I learned about his next project, Era of Supes. Era of Supes needed a builder. Strongman wanted the game to have a huge open world, and I immediately volunteered. When he let me join the team, I was incredibly happy. This finally felt like my opportunity to become a real developer. Sort of, yes and no. I planned the map during my summer vacation in July 2025. While normal people were relaxing on the beach, I was sitting there planning the layout of a Roblox superhero world. The map would not contain one city, not two, but it would contain 4 entire massive cities: Metropolis, Gotham, New York, and Central City, all inside a world approximately 100,000 studs by 100,000 studs, surrounded by water. Water that you would sometimes fall through, but that was a minor detail. I used real world maps like Google Earth as inspiration for the roads and general layout. The scale was absolutely ridiculous, but I wanted the world to feel enormous, and he did too. Once the vacation was over, I was ready to begin. I drove home at a completely responsible speed, of course, and the moment I got back, I started building for months. I created roads, skylines, districts, landmarks, terrain, and infrastructure. The game was delayed repeatedly, but not because of me. Sometimes I was actively building, sometimes I was simply sitting in Discord waiting for the game to finally release. But after around 8 months of work, the day arrived. Era of Supes released on February 6th of 2026. On launch day, within the first hour, we had around 100 active players. I was extremely happy. After waiting for so long, people were finally exploring the world I had created. Players flew between skyscrapers and through the cities. They saw my landmarks. For the first time, my work was not limited to a private test server or a small faction game. It was inside a public game with a real audience. Then the complaints started. The map was lagging. Some areas lacked detail. Things took too long to load. The world was huge, way too huge. Roblox streaming system helped clients load nearby areas, but the server still had to manage a ridiculous amount of content, and Roblox servers are not exactly famous for unlimited power. To fix the client-side lag, I created a system that only loaded one city at a time, instead of keeping all 4 available together. That improved performance, but at the same time, the server itself still felt slow, and it made the combat feel terrible and delayed. After release, the player count began falling, and we had days where there were only around 20 people actively playing. After spending most of my year building the map, seeing the game drop that low made me question everything. Was it actually worth it? Did I lose? Was this just another failed project? I made YouTube shorts and TikTok to promote the game, but the videos weren't good, so unsurprisingly they didn't reach many people. But then, without warning, the player count exploded. 100, 200, 500, around 1,000 concurrent players. I could barely believe it. After those 20 and 30 player days, seeing 1,000 people inside the game felt unreal. The count eventually dropped again, often sitting around a few hundred during stronger periods, but the game had proven that it could attract a real audience. We continued updating it. Eventually, we made the painful decision to reduce the map, and 4 cities was simply too much. I deleted an enormous amount of work. I rebuilt the world around New York map with surrounding terrain, and the new world was still around 50,000 by 50,000 studs, so it wasn't exactly small, but it was far more manageable. And after more updates, the game became stable. It eventually peaked around 1200 concurrent players and generated real revenue. Over my entire time working on the project, I estimate that I personally earned around 300,000 Robux. And I was really grateful for that, but after working on the project for roughly a year, I also began realizing something. I didn't want to spend my entire future building someone else's game, and while Era of Supes was growing publicly, another project had quietly begun growing in the background. Somewhere around the time I became an Era of Supes developer, I also developed a new identity. Don't ask, it just kind of happened. From that point onward, Kermit became my main Roblox avatar. People in the Era of Supes community recognized me through it. There were even stickers of Kermit holding a gun that players used whenever an update got delayed. Nothing motivates a development team like armed Kermit. And while Kermit became part of my identity, the project on his computer became increasingly important too. That project was called Vandal. Wandel began in November 2025. The original idea was to create my perfect fantasy MMORPG, inspired by games like Blue Heater 2 and other experiences I had played. At first, it wasn't supposed to become a serious commercial release. It was mainly a place where I could practice scripting. I began learning how to use modern AI tools as well as tutorials to assist me in not to magically create an entire game, but to help me understand scripts, debug problems, and build systems I previously couldn't create. My first versions of Vandal were rough, very rough, but I didn't care. I created an inventory, basic magic, weapons, combat, stats, and NPCs that rewarded experience points when defeated. It lacked polish, it lacked proper content, and it barely had a real gameplay loop. But every new system taught me something. I continued developing Vandal alongside Era of Supes for many months, and at first, EOS remained my main project. But after EOS released, it didn't constantly require huge new builds since it was already struggling to handle all of my previous work. So gradually, I spent more and more time on Vandal, and something about developing my own game felt completely different. When testers found a bug, I could fix it immediately, and when I disliked a feature, I could just change it. When I had a new idea, I didn't have to wait for someone else to approve it. I wasn't only the builder, I was the programmer, the UI designer, the map creator, and the project lead. For the first time, I was creating the complete experience, and Vandal continued growing. The rough inventory became a real inventory system, and the combat expanded into many different weapon types. I created movement abilities, parties, trading, crafting, quests, guild ranks, magic progression, potions, armor, shops, character stats, a mini-map, and a full tutorial. I brought in friends, testers, and developers I already knew from the superhero community. People began testing the game regularly. They reported bugs, they gave feedback. I improved the world, and it felt amazing to see people playing something where every major decision came from me and my team. Era of Supes had shown me what a successful Roblox game could look like. Vandal showed me why I had wanted to become a developer in the first place. I wanted to create worlds of my own. Then, Era of Supes suddenly disappeared. One day, Roblox moderation removed the game. The reason given involved private information, but none of us properly understood what had triggered it. As far as we could tell, there was no clear explanation identifying the actual issue, and appeals were submitted, but they were denied or ignored. More appeals were submitted, and they were also ignored. For over a week, the game that had reached more than 1,000 concurrent players was simply gone, and so was the income it generated. Strawman created a copy where some players could continue playing and he began considering new projects in case Era of Supes never returned. But I didn't want to rebuild another superhero game from the beginning. I had already spent a year working on EOS, and outside of EOS, I had my own responsibilities. I had hired developers for Vandal to create models and animations. I had expenses. I had expected Era of Supes to continue generating enough revenue to support those costs. Suddenly, that income had disappeared, and fortunately, shortly before the takedown, I had completed another large commission. That commission arrived at almost the perfect moment and allowed me to pay what I owed. Honestly, it was incredibly lucky. I don't even know how it happened. Without that payment, the situation would have been much more difficult, but the takedown forced me to think seriously about my future. Even if EOS returned, did I want my plans to depend entirely on a project I didn't own? Did I want to continue spending my time waiting for decisions from someone else? Or did I want to take the risk and focus on the game I actually cared about most? I decided to leave Soup Studios and Era of Soups. There was no dramatic argument, there was no huge public conflict. I was still friends with the people involved. I simply knew that I wanted to put all my energy into Vandal. I had spent a year helping build someone else's vision. Now I wanted to build mine. And then, around 1 or 2 days later after I left, Era of Soups magically returned. Oof. Roblox had apparently decided to play one final joke on me. The game came back online, although the downtime had damaged its player count. Instead of the previous highs, it was now often closer to around 70 players during lower periods and roughly 200 during stronger peaks. Some people asked whether I would return, but I declined. Not because I hated the project, not because I wanted drama, but because by then my decision was no longer about whether EOS was online. I wanted Wandel to succeed, and I knew I couldn't give my own game everything while keeping one foot inside the old project. I had joined Era of Soup's development team around July 14th, 2025, and I left almost exactly 1 year later. I don't regret working on Era of Soups. That project taught me how to build at a huge scale. It taught me how release days feel. It taught me how quickly player counts can rise and fall. It taught me about performance, monetization, community management, and the reality of maintaining a live Roblox game. It also introduced me to many of the people who now support Vandal, but most importantly, it taught me what I actually wanted. I didn't only want to be known as the person who built a map for someone else. I wanted to create complete games. I wanted to build worlds where players could explore, progress, meet people, discover secrets, and feel like they actually lived there. That is what Vandal is supposed to become. It's a fantasy RPG with open exploration, quests, skill progression, weapons, magic, and so much more. Players begin in a forest tutorial where they learn how to fight and gather resources, smelt materials, and forge their first proper weapon. From there, they enter a large world and discover hidden locations. I will continue to expand that world with more enemies, including slimes and zombies, new quest lines, a graveyard, exploration rewards, and clothing options for character customization. And the goal is not just to create a place where players grind levels. I want Vandal to have atmosphere. I want players to walk through a forest at night with a lantern. I want them to find a hidden location and receive an item they didn't even know existed. I want them to travel with friends, help each other complete quests, trade equipment, and gradually become stronger. I want the world to feel calm when it should feel calm, and dangerous when it should feel dangerous. The game is being made by a very small team, basically just me and some friends, who did the skills like modeling and animation, which I'm not very good at. And yes, we are also secretly working on another game, but I'm not gonna reveal that yet, but trust me, it's really cool. Vandal is now approaching release, and for years I repeatedly started projects, lost motivation, and moved on, but this time I didn't. I kept building, even when systems broke, even when development became frustrating, even when Era of Supes disappeared, even when I had no guarantee that anyone would ever play my own game. Wandel began as a rough practice project, but now it has become the foundation for my own future as a Roblox developer. This video is partly a record for myself. I want to be able to return to it after release and remember what everything looked like before the game had a public audience, before the player counts, before the updates, before I knew whether this would succeed or not. Maybe Vandal releases and it becomes something big, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe I have to keep updating it for months before it finds an audience. I genuinely don't know. But I do know that this is the first time I'm releasing a full game that truly feels like mine. So this is my goodbye to the Era of Supes chapter and the beginning of Vandal Studios. Vandal is planned to release around August 28th or 29th. During the release weekend, I'm planning a race where the highest level player can earn special reward and a permanent place inside the game's history. The exact details will be announced through the Discord before launch, and the game as well as the community links are in the description down below. And because I have now spent almost everything I own on development and real-life responsibilities, Vandal also contains the greatest feature in modern gaming, a gem shop. Buy gems, fund the next update. Allow me to eat food. I'm kidding. Mostly. But seriously, playing the game, giving feedback, sharing the video, or joining the community would genuinely help more than you could probably realize. This project has already taken me further than I expected when I first opened Roblox Studio, and now I finally get to find out where it goes next. Thank you for watching. Peace out and spread kindness.